All right. Well, everybody, welcome to Digital Media 340R, right? In special topics in digital audio. And this is the audio lecture series with today we got Carl Moller from a lot of places, NFL Films, WWE, from sometimes the New Orleans Saints, sometimes a freelance guy, and we're really happy to have you here today. I've sent
Good
you
to
out
be here.
questions. We're gonna just kind of run through those questions and not a very formal fashion. We want to keep this nice and flow and easy, but the students have been able to see your bio, and so let's just start rolling. Let me preface this. I'm gonna tell you guys how I met Carl. So you guys know that we've been doing the Louisiana project with the immersive audio, the jazz dance halls, and actually we're flying out with the group to Louisiana, and just so happens the person sitting next to me on the plane was Carl. And we started talking and realized that we both do audio things, and started asking him questions about what does he do for a living, and he started expounding, and it was like, hey, that's awesome that we happen to sit next to each other. He was out here doing some skiing, and we were headed back to Louisiana to get what we were doing. And so having a native in Louisiana helped us out, because we happened to be out there during one of the Mardi Gras celebrations, and Carl said, go to like this location and you'll see the parade. And it was quite awesome, because otherwise I don't think I'd ever experienced that. I wouldn't even known. But Carl, great to have you here. I've kind of spilled the beans a little bit, but what do you do for work?
So I guess my specialty for most of my career, the longest part of my career, is doing sound for picture. So I handle, you know, again, any sound for picture like is my wheelhouse. So whether it be any kind of TV, any kind of like film stuff, it's like that's what I know how to do, or that's what I do professionally and get paid for. Now, and within that, like right now, like my career is kind of just morphed into mainly sports type content. WWE's would I include that? It's like sports entertainment, but that's what I do predominantly, and very like specific things. Like you mentioned, NFL. What I do for them is very specific. Is miking up players. I could certainly I do more things with them sometimes, but that's my main game with them. Um, I've done other things in the past, like I started out in a studio, as you remember from my bio, did that for a while. But I've always kind of, always just stayed kind of the media side of things because it was easier to make a living.
Yeah. With you split time with the NFL and the WWE. Does that get hard to balance your scheduling, or is it pretty easy to
It's pretty easy to schedule it. Again, like I'm a contractor, freelancer. So both, well, with NFL, particularly when it's season's coming up, they're asking me if I can do all the games. If I can't, they're flexible. They can find replacements. It's not a big deal. I've done it long enough that they want me, but as a freelancer, they understand that sometimes you get a better gig, a better paying gig, a longer gig, and I might have to be replaced. And so it's not an issue. They just want to know beforehand. Same thing with WWE. Um, they ask my schedule. They ask me when I'm available, like 2 months to a month in advance, and I let them know. And if there's a conflict, it's not that hard to find someone to replace me.
So you with the timeout, like WWE runs all year. The
Yeah,
NFL,
they're 52 weeks a year. It's crazy.
yeah.
Like there's 6 hours, and that's not even counting competition of new wrestling program every week. Who watches that? It's insane.
There's a lot out there, a lot of
I love People love it. I was always at some kid turning 13 somewhere, right?
right. Yeah, I used to watch it all the time. So
Yeah, no, I watched it for a couple of years too. Yeah, we talked about this, but
yeah. Um, you talked about in your bio going from a like music recording studio path into the film path, and you talked about how the pay was one of the things that really brought you into that. Do you want to talk about like what it is that you see a difference between like the music side of a recording studio versus kind of what you're doing now?
yeah, it's very different than being in a music studio. Particularly with sound for picture. Um, for what I do, you know, when I'm all my gear is strapped onto me, you know, whether it's um with NFL or the the miking of the players is different. But sometimes I'll go do special assignments with them and do more traditional location sound, which is, I have a mixer, wireless, connected to the camera, or recording, or both, setting a wireless hop to get audio to the camera, but it's all self-contained. Like I can wear it on me, I can run everything. I've got a boom mic, I've got wireless mics to put on. So I'm sort of, very small walking studio, so to speak. There's very little. It's changed a little bit now, but 5, 10 years ago, there was very little processing that you're doing while you're recording, which you don't want to do technically. Being you want to handle everything in post. Um, Nowadays, some of the mixers offer some compression and noise suppression and stuff like that. But so in a lot of ways, other than you're putting mics on stuff in a studio, that's and you're recording and you're using faders, that's where that's the only sort of commonality.
Yeah.
um,
How did your
uh,
skill set transfer over? I mean, you have to like I think people think, "Oh, well, these are such different worlds than if I want to learn one, it means I can't do the other." But there are crossovers, and how do you get?
yeah, no, it's all the same. It's all audio, it's all signal path. Like when I never I got into sound because I love music, and that's how I started on the audio path. And then sorry if I'm repeating myself, some of my bio, but my mother was in the video production world, so that's how I got into it. She knew a guy who was just opening up a production studio. I started interning for him, and working on that side of things, which is be a more traditional studio setting. With digital audio had just started, so we we're working with the first iterations of Pro Tools and Sound Designer and some of those. Working on smaller mixer, recording booth, recording voice, importing sound effects or nat sound, location sound, mixing for video, radio, computer games, whatever we can get in the door. Interning, and then got a job with this small production house. I was like, I should go get a degree or get more of a foundation. So I got a recording engineering degree in a local studio where I was living, and got some of the foundations. And all the foundations are the same, how microphones work, what you can do with a mixer, common processing techniques, stuff like that. And um, although in the field, it's much simpler. You're not doing much EQ. You're not doing anything fancy with compression. Stuff you're doing in the studio, you're not doing on the field. You're focusing on the recording process and recording it as best you can. Um, so one of the challenges that you don't face in a recording studio so much is dealing with all the outside world noise. How do you get that in control? Which you ultimately don't. Hopefully you talk to a producer and say, hey, doing it right next to doing an interview or doing a scene right next to a street with cars going by is a really bad idea, unless you've got a production team that can coordinate with the city and like stop traffic, which is what they do for films. When you have a big budget, you can do that. um, and or having to be proactive. You're doing something inside a building, the location you showed up on, and the AC is really loud. So you try to go find a building engineer and say, hey, can we turn off the AC during X amount of time so I can get rid of this air handler noise that's going to be a nightmare for post. That being said, technology these days, with like Isotope or some of these filtering softwares, miraculous what they can do. So, at some, it almost doesn't matter. But um, as again, as what you should do is get as quiet, as clean as possible. So post can do the least amount of processing, because that's always what's going to sound best in the long run. Although really only to the people who know that it sounds better, because most people don't know the difference.
Right. I've seen a something from Cedar Audio.
Yeah, Cedar is amazing.
WAV.
Isotope.
Yeah.
Cedar makes rack units or really small units that you can use in a bag. Like when I work with wrestling, because it's kind of just straight to air, we use the mixer has a Cedar in his console and his mix booth on site that he uses. And then we have a portable one, and we'll do just a little bit of filtering, just kind of take the air out of the room, the noise, just kind of low, and just the air, the rumble of the room. If anyone's ever played around with a mic on a boom pole, some shotgun mic, you know what I'm talking about. There's lots of extraneous, just like air. So Cedar does a great job of, there's a threshold and amount of attenuation, and it does a real good job of taking out some of the air without affecting the EQ too much. If you can overdo it, and you start to notice, you're losing some frequency. So
Yeah.
yeah.
As you were coming up, and currently, we like to encourage students to like find somebody to kind of seek their path. Who are some of your main professional and creative influences as you started into this world?
Well, I guess my main one, firstly, was the owner of the studio I worked for. His name was David Bartley. Um, he took me under his wing, taught me the ins and outs of digital audio, and to also learn myself. He was a location sound guy before he opened up the studio. So when I couldn't stand being in the studio anymore, staring at a computer, editing sound files and recording voice, he was like, "Here, I'll sell you can." He sold me his old gear and kind of showed me a little bit of the ropes on how to handle yourself on a set, and that kind of thing. So Dave Bartley, working. I was also had a short stint as a Foley mixer, which was really interesting. Again, there was a period of time I was a whiz on Pro Tools editing. I was really fast. And that's how I got kind of, there was a Foley artist. This all happens in LA. There was a Foley artist who moved out to where I was in DC, and they set up a remote studio for him. And so getting to see that was interesting, and flying out to LA to see how that whole world works. It's just like a sound effects factory. It's really bizarre. The Foley artist was really cool. It's amazing to watch those guys work. That was less of an influence, is more just kind of interesting seeing another side of that sound for picture world that exists, and it's big business, and some of those big features, and there's mainly features, less so television sometimes, but every sound is recreated. Like every word uttered is 95% just redone in a studio. So all those guys, the actors are acting on screen, but they also have to do it all again in a studio, which is kind of blew my mind. I couldn't believe they did that. Like,
Yeah.
genius is that. So influences. So then after, again, I was back in the studio. I didn't want to get back in the studio. I got a call to work on location for a TV show, a drama. This was in the 90s, filmed in Baltimore. It was called Homicide. It was a mystery cop drama. And this guy called me out of the blue to be the third. So in the big television production or a film, it's typically your sound department is like three people. There's your mixer, there's your boom op, and then there's the third who supports the boom op and the mixer and mics people and handles inventory, replaces beat up gear, etc. So getting in that world, that was the mixer I worked for, who, part of my language, is the biggest piece of shit I've ever worked for. He wasn't, I hate that dude. He wasn't an influence, but I learned a lot about the biz. I mean, he
Right.
was, you know, crazy perfectionist. Again, like listening to things that no one's going to hear except, you know, maybe, you know, just audio geeks, you know, but such an extreme. And he was such a freak about it. It really turned me off to that part of the business. But because a lot of Hollywood people can take themselves way too seriously, but very educational, learned a lot, interesting. Um, see, after that, I went back into freelance world. As far as influences go, again, as a location sound person, it's mainly you. I mean, you're the sound guy, so that you're not working with other people. You know, I may run into more experienced folks and or I learn they're more experienced after I chat to them. I might pick their brain about stuff, or I might just talk about gear. Um, Often, if I have questions, I'll just go online to Reddit or some of the audio forums to get, you know, people's take on it. And specifically for film, you know, you start listening to or watching movies in a different way, and you follow some of the big mixers, and so that's always interesting. You know, there's documentaries out there about some of the Star Wars guys and what they did that brought the, you know, level up. Um, so those guys are influential, or it's interesting to see what they did to change the business and make sound better on screen. Um,
Yeah. So
yeah.
one thing you said, and this you could maybe take from this, like, so you had somebody that you worked for that was just really difficult to work for. What are other some things like that were really hard that maybe have shaped you, that students could learn to avoid from maybe secondhand experience just hearing about it?
Right. Well, particularly with TV, and I'll talk about reality TV show. Being a mixer on a reality TV show is hard on the body. I mean, nowadays, with the technologies getting better, you can get like four receivers into what was used to be just a single receiver in your pack. So, you know, 10 years ago, your mixer bag that on a reality show, you might be following X, Y, and Z around 20 hours a day, 6 days a week. And you have a pack that could weigh 50 pounds, you know. So physically, and that's a young man's game, physically, that's hard on your body. I mean, there's lots of gear and straps to distribute the weight, but it's physical. Never want to do reality again. You know, I'm too old for it. It's hard on the body, but you learn how to mic up people really well. You know, it's can be an entry point into the business because uh, it's cheap television. I mean, it doesn't cost a lot, and the production companies that do it don't want to pay a lot either. But um, looks good on the resume. If you can survive that and do it repeatedly, people, you know, clients that want to hire you know what you're doing to a certain extent because you really get run through the ringer.
Yeah, with your equipment, when you're on your different gigs, is it always your equipment or do you
It
get
all
it?
depends. I wish it was my equipment. With WWE, they have their own, so I use theirs. Um, as a freelancer, you always want to get an equipment rental, but it doesn't always happen that way, or you can't get the rental rate that you should get. But I have everything I would need for simpler. Like if I were to be a mixer on a film that's much more gear intensive, I'm not set up for that. I kind of stepped out of that world. Um, that world is also very time consuming. You know, when you're on a movie or a TV show, again, it's 12-hour days, 6 days a week. It might last 8 months. A movie might be 3 months, but you give your life away for that amount of time. You get a big check at the end. You're not spending money because they're feeding you and all that, and you'll have a lot of money at the end of it, but you give your life away for, you know, however many months you're on it.
Yeah. And with what you're doing now, you have control over your own time. How valuable is that for you?
For me, it's super valuable, and that's why, you know, I did what can be considered a not smart move and kind of put all my eggs in one basket. Like when I started working for WWE 20 years ago, I where I grew up, where I wanted to move from where I was. WWE doesn't care where you live as long as you're close to an airport. So I was like, hey, this is great. I can go live wherever I want and get to work. They don't care. It's not a big deal. Um, so that was a plus. At the time, things have changed for my department now at WWD, but at the time, I was lucky enough to, like, they liked me, they wanted me. They were like, you have every gig if you want it, 52 weeks a year. It's like, sweet. And I can make my own schedule. It's like, if you can't make it, it's all right, we'll find somebody. So, like, amazing. Like, that's kind of unheard of,
Right.
to have that sweet kind of setup. So, but that cost me, I was still doing some freelance stuff outside of that. And I did for a while. And then, you get clients, and if you keep saying no to clients, they stop calling you. So my client base went from mediocre to medium to WWE. And then that was it. I mean, I also, because of that sweet setup, that took care of my financial needs. Also, being somewhat, I wasn't hungry to do more. I'm not a workaholic. I want to work myself to death. I like having, some free time. So having that kind of schedule really suited me. Um, so that's kind of why I put all my eggs in one basket, knowing one day that might bite me in the ass. And it kind of did 2 years ago in my department. The WWE got more corporate and they started slashing some people on the road. My department got affected by that, so I don't have that kind of sweet setup. But I get 3 to 4 gigs with them a month, which is just good enough. And I will fill in with some football stuff here and there, and occasional freelance gig. But um, that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, and so with that, where do you see yourself in like 5, 10 years? What is the future?
Hopefully retired.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Doing my own stuff. The one thing, I got into. The one thing I would say to you guys as students, whatever reason you're into audio, there's a creative aspect to it. So try to, it doesn't always translate into money or a job, but don't forget about that. So my job, I don't find, it's not very creative. It's a little creative in that it's kind of like a video game when I'm on set or with WWE, where you're tracking talking heads with the boom mic, and you want it to sound even and good. And there's no rehearsal. They want it the first take. It becomes like a game. Sometimes it's really easy and boring, and sometimes a little bit of challenge, but there's a little bit of creativity in that. Other than that, it's that's what I miss about what I do. So, I have projects in mind of stuff I'd like to get into afterwards when I have time. But so I guess my point being that, that creativity, you may lose some of it at a gig, but try to keep it alive somewhere else. It's always there for you. You may not get paid for it, but give yourself some time for that. Because I know, I mean, I miss it.
I think that's great advice. You know, people, I've had students in the past that think that they're going to go out and land their dream job right away, and they find that they're not doing their dream job in the first, you know, little bit of their career, and then they're like, oh, I've stifled all my creativity by slaving my time away. And I think that, you got it in the bag. I mean, what do you do that keeps you creative? I'm sure you've got hobbies and talents that you're doing that probably relate to this, that keep you so that you're not feeling burned out.
Right. Well, musician for a time, so recording myself, recording bands I was in. Do less of that now. I'll meet people and maybe help them out with some recording, or I worked with this duo for 6 or 8 months, helping them and re-recording some stuff that they did. So that was fun. I wish I was doing more of that, and that's kind of on the docket. But as the more being an adult kind of sucks with the responsibility. Responsibility takes over, and outside of a job, I have this whole other slew of shit I have to do, and I own property, and that's a whole other like time suck. So um, you kind of just do what you can.
Yeah.
Um, but there's one thing to be said. Starting out, if I wanted to just stick with the music, stick with the music route, and just be committed to that, I mean, you should go for it. Just realize it's, as far as money goes, it can be really hard to get into it, but can also be really rewarding. I don't know how many of you, maybe all of you, are into it for the music side, but it can be done. It's just a tougher road. So
I'm gonna switch the view over real quick. So you can see some of them here. We've had them hide their cameras because they're not on. But uh, if you guys are planning on doing music, can you just put your hand up really quick if that's what your think your intent and focus is? How about if your intent is like video games and that direction? A couple more. How many of you guys post production track? Anybody on this call right now? Ethan's hand goes up in a little raised hand. Yeah. So we've got a pretty good balance of people here. Anybody want to do live sound like touring? Yeah, there we go. A couple of you guys as well. So yeah, we have a pretty good balance of what they are hoping to be able to do when they get through school. We have, you can see Tanner over in the top corner there. Maybe it's different, but he's in our recording studio right now, which is the one that we do a lot of the music recording on. But I don't know if anybody happens to be in studio B there, but we have another studio that we have a Foley pit, and so we have people doing
I
a
have Foley Pack. Cool.
yeah, a lot of different things. We try to cover a gamut of what audio is. So yeah, I think that expressing that you're not just falling on deaf ears, because you have people who are like, oh, I just do want to focus on the aspect of post production, and but seeing that there's a crossover and where you cross over your career, I think it helps shed light for a lot of people on, you know
Right.
what, okay, I might start in one direction and end up going somewhere else because that's where the road takes you.
Right. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Finding, you know, if you do find yourself like just so, I mean, it's so broke, or just like needing money, like identifying gigs that you can get a decent paying gig here and there will help support what you love doing, and identifying those things are useful and helpful. Like, again, for me, if I was more focused with my free time throughout the years, I could have, I had a decent amount of free time that I spent, fucking off or doing other stuff. But if I was really driven and focusing on, audio and recording, I would have had the time to do that, plus making money with wrestling. But I'm not
Came
exactly
out
that
here
person.
and shred the slopes, right, on your snowboard.
Yeah, yeah, right. I love snowboarding. I love traveling. There's lots of things I really enjoy, and so
I
way
think
which
the
one too.
biggest takeaway that we can pull from this is you're still living a balanced life. You still have things that you enjoy and you still do them. And we see people that come in some from other parts of the industry that are a complete slave to what they're doing. And for you to be able to come in here and say, well, actually live life, that I think is very helpful for these guys to see as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
really appreciate that. The last question before we turn it over to these guys really quick.
Let me just in kind of in tying in with that. Um, it's good to kind of step back, or I just have some advice as far as like where money is made in audio. Like in my part of the business, I know from my perspective, and what the technologies that support sound reinforcement, or communications, or just sound recording on location. Those are big industries in the sound world. So, like, what is real big right now, like in my industry, and like, say, uh, conferences, it's comms, and everything is going wireless. So managing wireless, and there's these amazing Dante driven digital uh, communications. One in particular is Readle. Like if you can uh, learn those systems and learn Dante, they're not it's not that difficult. It just takes time to do it. You can make money doing that. People need people who know how to do that and can walk into whatever context and be able to provide flawless wireless communications. Huge need and everything's going more and more wireless, and it's getting more complicated dealing with the wireless spectrum and how much is in there, and so it's not exciting, it's not that interesting. It's kind of interesting on a technical level, but um that can pay really good money.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. I think most of the people in the call are Dante level 1 certified. Uh, if they're not, they just haven't taken a class that I teach that we get Dante level 1 certified. But you're right. Wireless is and what wireless can do has improved so much even in the last 5 years. Uh, like I remember seeing Dante at the trade shows, and I was like, "What is this Dante thing?" And now
Yeah. No,
every
Dante is amazing. It's changed the game for live sound. I mean, when I started doing this, for television, or think of like the WWE shows are like a live concert, so they're doing load ins and load outs, and they're a well-oiled machine. It was during the day, but they were doing running lines of copper. They would call it, pardon my language, it was thick. They call it horsecock, and it was so heavy, and we lay so much of it. And now it's all it's on a whatever, I forget the name of the cable, but it's all Dante or glass. Help me out.
fiber optic, you got
Yeah,
the
fiber
yeah,
optics.
yeah,
That's just like took out so much of the labor of it, and you can so many channels through that stuff. It's amazing.
yeah. And in a WWE show, how many, if you can talk about it, how many channels of audio will you typically have in a show?
Let me never thought about specific. Again, for WWE, I'm my department's very specific. It's backstage. I could do some what they call A2ing, which is support for the audio that makes it on air as well as comms. But my main gig with them is just working on the soap opera stuff. So let me just think about it for a second. I mean, lots of effects mics. I don't know, 20 channels, 24 channels, but what makes live TV so challenging for the mixer is that you're also in charge of all the comms. So for a live audio crew can be 2 to 8 people, depending on the complexity of it. But as a mixer, you're also have your producers talking to you, directors talking to you, you're hearing all this stuff and you're having to mix and you do music cues. It's a lot of multitasking, and it's almost, I mean, mixing is a small part of it. Of course, it's the most important part, but you got to be doing. It's a difficult thing to get your head around until you've been doing it for a while.
Yeah, yeah. It's good to know. I know that you work with NFL Films. Can you talk about the separation of NFL Films versus broadcast? What's the difference between those two entities?
Yeah. So NFL Films is the production company of the NFL. So, if you guys watch Hard Knocks on HBO, that's NFL Productions. Like their crews go out and do that. They produce all of it. They make it. They edit it all in house. So it's their production company. And it used to be all on film back in the day. That's why it's NFL Films and it's stuck. I mean, broadcast is handled by the networks. So they have deals with the networks, and the networks bring in their crews, and they handle everything. Um,
And I just wanted to ask that because I think that when you aren't sure, you just know that, oh well, football's on TV, so that means that it's all the same thing, and it's not the same thing, right?
yeah,
It's very, very different crews that have to work kind of in tandem with each other and
Yeah.
not step on each other's toes at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sometimes there'll be special projects going on that NFL Film specifically does about a game. So they're wiring up different players, um, and interacting with the teams and broadcast in their own way that, you know, doesn't have anything to do with broadcast, but it's just another arm of what's going on.
Yep. Yeah. Let me turn the time over to my students because I'm sure that they have questions, and so let's open up you guys to ask Carl some questions. And John, you got your hand up, so why don't you go ahead and launch us?
Thanks. My name is John. Nice to meet you, Carl. And my question is, how do you set up all the wireless mic frequencies for, say, an NFL gig, where you're miking up like two whole football teams? Like, how do you deal with intermodulation frequencies, like local TV channels, stuff like that?
So on NFL, what one? It's with the NFL, it's not that many player mics. You're not miking up everybody. Like, so there's parabs and there's effects mics all around the stadium, so to get the crowd noise. And the parab mics catch a lot of the play as well. Every in a big event like that, there's a frequency coordinator. That's his job, is to take all the frequencies for whoever, all the needs of broadcast, or maybe outside news channels or other, like a reality show maybe. They check in and he is given like a list of frequencies. There's a computer program that they use that does it all for them for the most part. It's a challenge. They have whole companies that's what they do, is handle wireless, all the wireless in a big event like that, and make sure it streams. I mean, it works properly. And sometimes, you know, there's hiccups and they have to improvise. And again, luckily the tech these days is real flexible. You can cut in the right instance, you can control everything from a laptop, where, you know, 10 years ago it was, you don't have that luxury. But now, especially with like Dante and wireless communications between gear and receivers, like, you know, I could tap into a transmitter on a player, and if he's like 5 dB too hot, I can control it from a computer or from a wireless controller or from apps sometimes. Um, but yeah, frequency coordination, it's a big part of it. And I don't have to do it that much. I'm told, like, from a frequency coordinator, like what my freak should be.
Okay. Do you
So
know if they're using
now if I'm on
Shure
a,
Wireless Workbench?
yeah, no, that's one of them.
Okay.
For sure. That's one of the big ones. Sure. And their new digital accent technology is awesome. Um, now, if I was on a production of my own, say if I was in a reality show and I had like 8 wireless mics to work, frequencies to worry about, there's different frequency analyzers. You can get some cheap ones. There's one called Tiny SA, which works surprisingly well. It's like $100, and it'll give you, you know, once you learn how to use it, it shows you the spectrum and what's up. You know, what part of the spectrum you want to stay out of, and what's clean, and then you're the do it yourself. A lot of the location receivers themselves would have a scanner on it, so you can just pull up the scanner, hit scan, and it'll kind of show you the same thing. Like if you're working, for instance, it's very common to work with what they call wireless blocks, which is kind of Electrosonics came out with that. And you'll buy a wireless gear in block 21 or block 25. So if you're in block 25 and all your gear is in that, you frequency coordinate yourself. You run a scan and see what's open, and then do your own thing. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Jaden, go ahead.
All right. Hi. My question is, how would you suggest getting into the freelance world without any clients to begin with, without any like
Volunteer.
Yeah,
Volunteer,
volunteer.
work for nothing. That's that's the easiest way and the best way. You know, make friends and say, look, I'll work, you know, you don't have to pay me, or, you know, maybe after a little while you can start paying me, but I just want to learn how to do it. That's that's the way to do it. I mean, if you have a degree, you know, some colleges or some uh like Full Sail, for instance, which you've probably heard of in Florida, they have placement programs. That's also a way. I don't know if where you're at has a placement program, but they, you know, they're a lot of help. But without that, uh, yeah, just volunteer and say, hey, I want to do this. I'll work for nothing.
If you want to get into location, Jaden, around here, we have some alumni that kind of like are really uh, big kind of local names that we can hook you up with to
Yeah.
help
Also,
start.
also like in the film world, unions are a big thing. So you can approach the union and talk to them, hey, I want to get into sound. They'll put you in touch with mixers. You can join the union. Um, they're always needing new people, or they're happy to have new people that, you know, are willing to work for less, depending on the budget. And that's another way to get in. So approach the union, and they can introduce you to, give you names of mixers, and you can cold call people. And, you know, a lot of part of what I did when I got out of the studio after I got some gear, my the owner of the studio gave me his marketing list, and a lot of these people coming in, it was a lot of that, what they needed were location recording folks, because there was a lot of video stuff. So I just called them and said, hey, I'm doing this now. I'm around and available. So it was kind of just like cold calling, you know, production companies. Once you get enough experience and you're confident that if someone says, yeah, I need a sound guy for this interview, you know, what's your rate, how much you charge for gear? Yeah.
That answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. So follow-up question, I guess. When do you think you started getting paid like an amount that you could actually live off of? How far into your career?
Um, I mean, when I was in the studio, I was living off that. I wasn't saving any money. Um, when I went freelance, you know, the market rate for freelancers is good money. Like, but if you only get one of those gigs every 2 weeks, it's a different story. When I got into the business, the timing for me in Washington D.C. was incredible. Because I started out in news, and like I don't know if you guys remember or know who Monica Lewinsky, the whole thing with President Clinton, that was going on. So everyone was booked, and so other, you know, things outside of news who needed sound guys, they were desperate for people, and my name got around, so I was able to get gigs like surprisingly easy, which I felt really lucky for that. So if you can get like a steady, yeah. Once I started freelancing and get the freelancer rate with the gear rentals, when I started making, you know, better money, I could save and make a living. But it's all dependent on, you know, it's much harder if in the music world, until you have a lot of experience. Um, um, so you know, hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
You guys have any more questions? John, you look like you might have a question. John's always got a question. That's a good thing about John, because he always asks a lot of questions, and it's not a bad thing.
Thanks, Brian. I do have another question. What were some missteps or mistakes early on in your freelancing career that you wish you could have gone back and done differently?
You know, I gave up my studio chops, my editing chops. You know, I was so good at Pro Tools, and I let that go. That I really regret that, because I would have a more diverse client base. I could probably, yeah, I could be not having to travel like I do, and probably be doing, you know, if I was smarter about it. Hindsight's always 2020, but um, I could be doing a lot more studio stuff and not having to leave. Um, so yeah, keeping up your, keeping your talents, keeping up to speed on your various, talents. Yeah, letting go of I'm repeating myself, but that's a misstep. Excuse me. Another misstep for me with WWE. When I got hired with them, I I stuck to my department, and it took me a number of years to kind of reach out to live sound, which I was not that interested in. But I wish I would have approached the other departments sooner and say, "Hey, I want to learn this part of that of the broadcast." And I did that eventually, but I should have done it sooner. Um, Partially, I didn't find it interesting, but from a job making money perspective, it would have been smart to do. I eventually did, but maybe a little too late. But anyway.
So you when you were talking about something a minute ago, you talked about the parabs or the parabolic mics. We don't have any of those on campus, and I get asked a question about those probably once a year. People I get a number of questions about them, so I'm just gonna ask. I don't know how much they weigh because I've never held one. People are like, how much does that weigh? How often are those people getting knocked over on the sidelines? Because it seems like there's always a highlight film of the sound.
No, they get knocked over. Yeah. No, they're not that. It's not that heavy. It's a plexiglass dome. It's not a lot of heavy gear. There's a little strap on it, so to help support it. I mean, they're not holding all their weight. All the weight was just their arms. They got a strap to distribute some of the weight.
And what is that guy's job called?
Parab guy.
Crab guy?
He's parabs. He's parabs.
Just the parabs. You guys
Yeah.
are doing the parabs. That
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to go track down a gig doing that just so I can answer these questions. Like, let me do it. I won't even ask you guys to pay me. I just wanted so I can answer the question for my students. Just one game, but
It can be a long kind of bore. I mean, it's interesting, but if you do it all the time, it's you're just tracking. The mixer will tell you like what your responsibility is. There's used for football. There's usually 4 to 6 parabs on a field. I don't know about college how deep they go, but for NFL, there's at least 4, sometimes 6 parabs, and they're responsible for certain where they are on the field. Like,
that makes sense. Makes sense for me. That was just something that like I said, it's a once a year somebody comes up to me and asks me very specifically about those things, and I'm like, I have no experience with them, so I can't answer your question, but I need to get some experience so I can answer that question.
Yeah.
So you guys go. Even I need to learn more, right? So, well, if you guys don't have any more questions, really appreciate your time with us, and hopefully the next time you come out to Utah, we can have you stop in. Do you have any plans coming out this year?
Probably, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love snowboarding, so I usually try to make it out there once a year.
Yeah, so let us know next time you're around. We'll invite you down to the school and we'll give you a tour, and we can maybe do some more questions that people might have, and some off camera questions that you can talk more about. Well, thanks again, Carl. It was a pleasure having you on, and look forward to keep hearing about how you progress in your career. And we know that like you said, in a couple of years, you're hoping to be retired, and at that point, maybe you'll just turn into a snowboard junkie bum. So
I'll get to use. I just got a geophone, which I haven't played around with yet. So I'll make some weird location sound recordings.
sounds good.
Hopefully.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's once again, it's just a pleasure. It's you guys. One of the things that I hope you learn from this, he sat next to me on a flight, and that's how this whole conversation even started. You never know, just by saying hi to the person sitting next to you, what type of conversation can unfold from that, and where that can make your life even better. Because I know that while we were in Louisiana, we got to see and experience some things that we wouldn't normally have gotten to experience just by having a local insight saying, go stand on this corner, you'll see the parade coming around the corner in a few minutes. So pretty cool stuff. Networking is a great thing. Do you have social media or anything if these guys want to reach out to you and contact you that they could reach out and follow your career?
Sure. I don't really post a lot of my career. That's another thing I kind of regret. I never not an aggressive social media person. Moved to a different generation. But you know, you can find me on Facebook, just my name, or on Instagram. I think I guess Facebook's a little easier. But if you guys have questions or whatever, you won't find a lot of my work posted or anything, but I'm on there.
All right, well, we'll keep in touch.
All right, nice meeting you guys. Thanks, Brian. Talk
Have-
later.